Good day, everyone. We are back with another opportunity to celebrate Black history. And I have one of the most amazing humans I know, Mr. Jeff Aubry, with me. How are you today, Jeff?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No doubt. So, Jeff leads, it's now called Next Gen, right?
Yeah, Next Gen Basketball Players Union.
Which used to be the G League. Is that what it was called back in the
So I represent all standard contract G League players. There
Mhm.
are at any given moment 312 under
Mhm.
contract,
Mhm.
but my bargaining unit usually expands just because there's so much transition in and out of the G League.
Mhm.
So every year, probably at least half of those players are brand new to the G League,
Mhm.
and then many more, sign contracts mid-season, get waived, come back, get traded. So I have kind of a larger group of players that I serve, which I try to include as many former D League and G League players as possible. So I would probably estimate the number at about 3 to 4 thousand.
Mm, big work, important work. So we're so glad that you do that and so glad to have you. So before we talk about your amazing journey in your career, I do want to ask you a moment, a tiny moment that you're quietly proud of that maybe most people wouldn't know or would be surprised to know.
Hmm. Oh, let's see. So when I was young, like a lot of people, I think there were moments of adversity, but I'll tell you, I grew up living with my mom, and my mom was a go-getter, a doer. She was a police officer, detective, actually, rose to second grade detective in NYPD. She's one of the first Latinas to be in the department, and you know, jobs like that take their toll.
Mhm.
Significant stress and trauma that she experienced in that role. She worked homicides and rapes. So had a moment in her life where, like a lot of people in the 80s and 90s turned to drugs,
Mm.
and certainly had a moment that kind of disrupted our whole lives. And those kind of moments, derail and take a lot of people off their paths. Um, and while it's not something I talk about a ton, as I told my mother, her story is my story.
Right.
So for folks to know me, they have to know her. And so that moment, I was, oh goodness, 13 maybe.
Mhm.
And to recover, she went and spent time in an inpatient facility. It was about a 45-day program, which I had the option at the time to stay with my father or stay with my grandparents. I took neither of those options and stayed in the house by myself.
At
And
13?
I would say it is the turning point of my life where I became
Mm.
independent, self-reliant. I had no choice. I mean, I had a choice. There were choices there, but I chose to kind of do it on my own. And that way of being, I think, um, led me to the rest of my life.
Wow.
How I've operated since. It was an opportunity for me to grow up and mature. My mother was a tough but doting person, so always lots of affection and support and energy. So I learned how to generate that for myself in
Mm.
her absence. There, I did things better. So all my grades in that 45-day period went up.
Wow.
Um, kept the house clean, cooked for myself. Certainly had support. My grandparents checked in on me every day.
Mhm.
And we had a tenant who lived, in an apartment on the top of my house at the time, who was also available and around. But like I look at that moment and was proud of myself for handling it as maturely as I did, for bouncing back and for using it as a launching pad for the things I wanted to achieve. Up to that point, I was always a good student because
Mhm.
obviously I was naturally gifted, but I would never say that I worked that hard at being a
Mm.
good student. And I felt like there was a shift in that period where I decided that I was going to be a better student than I was, and more focused and more determined. And probably for the rest of my high school academic career, I don't think I was ever off the honor roll from that period on.
Wow.
So like seems a small thing, but I know that it was a big part of the foundation of everything else I was able to do up to this point in my life.
Jeff, that does not seem like a small thing. That is a big thing. And I did ask you for something people will be surprised to know.
Well,
And you are
I don't
spot
talk
on. I
about
am
that
very
that
surprised
much.
to know.
So,
Yes, we've talked about a few things and I did not know that. So thank you
Mhm.
not only for sharing that, but that's obviously a very personal story to share. So thank you for sharing. That's very inspiring. I want to ask you though, with that being said, what did you go through a debate or was it like absolutely not doing, like how did you get to that decision
Mm.
to A, stay by yourself, and B, what made you say I'm gonna lock in and step it up during that
Mm.
period?
I think I didn't want to have to worry about me.
Mm,
I thought the best way for me to take care of myself was take care of the house and the things that I knew would concern her otherwise.
mm,
So, and then probably the solitude it was easier for me to focus. So being in the house by myself with my dog and,
mhm,
and that was it, so that's the way I thought about it at the time. It was a long time ago.
mhm.
But I do recognize that as like a pivotal moment in my life where I made a choice and that choice, kind of really, again, led me to everything else after it. More focused, more determined,
Mhm,
and without those attributes, I don't know how anybody achieves anything.
mhm. Okay, so I mean that leads us to my next question to share with us. For those who don't know, you had a very successful career playing professionally. So, kind of take us from there into basketball. When did you start? You're very tall, so I'm assuming you were tall as a kid. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
But tell us about from there on. What was your journey into basketball?
sure. So, started playing as a kid, about 10 years old or so, because my friends played.
Mhm,
I was pretty bad to start. Big kid. I was always a big kid, but not particularly coordinated or talented at that point. Didn't care much about basketball until my friends started playing.
mhm,
But once I started, there was something about it that I just couldn't put down.
mm,
Fell in love with it. I was a Laker fan first.
mhm.
There was something
From New
about
York. You're
that.
from New York, right?
I am from New York, and
Oh,
a Knicks
snap.
fan at the same time. But the
Okay.
Lakers were my first team. I was a
Okay.
big fan of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah, they were easy to be a
Yeah, they were
fan,
at
certainly
that
during that
time, right?
time.
Showtime Lakers, easy to be a fan.
Mhm.
So Kareem was my guy, mostly because I had read a book at the library about him as a kid, being tall, awkward, really intelligent, and a reader and interested in gaining knowledge and curious. So that kind of resonated with me. Like I said, I was a good student, but not because I worked very hard at it. But I would, like him in the book, would go to the library, just pick up a book, start reading, pick up another book, start reading before I know it. The library's about to close. I've been there all day.
Mm,
So that really kind of resonated with me. And he was like one of the greatest players in history. So, that
right.
was the thing. And then watching the Lakers, what really struck me was Magic Johnson. So
Mhm.
never seen anybody have so much fun playing basketball. And
Mm,
that really inspired me, like to get that much joy out of playing, out of being a part of a team, connected to other players, other people. So kind of took and ran with that. Loved playing with my friends, and then wanted to get better. Like I was the worst out of my friend group, so so that sucked, and I was competitive. So the moment they let me win so I wouldn't feel so bad, that was it. I couldn't stop. And that was, lonely nights in the park, in the driveway, working on shooting and all these things. Went to basketball camps, really focused and still wasn't very good. But again, I was a big kid, so at least I had that. Went to a high school that was we won a state championship. Very competitive. Probably 6 or 7 of my teammates from high school played in Division I programs.
okay.
So we were a very good team in New York City when New York City basketball was kind of really it.
Mhm.
And the first Division I school that recruited me was Cornell. Um, like I said, I wasn't by any means a star on my team. I started my senior year, but not before that. Didn't play, barely got on the court my sophomore year. Junior year, I was kind of a part of the rotation. So, really a late bloomer physically. And then Cornell was the first school that came calling. And I went for a visit and, met a couple brothers who are my best friends right now on this day. And, had conversations with them about everything like music and art and science and, social issues and, found a world where, a bunch of guys who were, really focused on being great basketball players were also focused on all the other things in the world that, one could be intellectually curious about. Mm-hmm. So I just felt like I belong there. Like this is where I belong. So, I went early decision, decided before the season even started that I was going to Cornell, got accepted. And that's where I landed. And it was the spot for me. I mean, had a decent senior year, went on to Cornell, and started my first Cornell game, which I think I might've been the only freshman, maybe in decades to have done that. I don't think I started another game after that, but certainly started that one.
You know that might not have been a good decision.
Yeah, hey, I talked my way into it. I had a good, kind of preseason leading up to that. So, but no, I had a decent career at Cornell. I think I was still late blooming, so it took me a while again for things to come together. Started my entire sophomore year, junior year, senior year. So led I think I have the all-time blocks record in Cornell history. So led the league in blocks for 2 years or 3 years, sophomore, junior. So 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. Had some really big games against some really big teams. And somewhere in my junior year, I had a call from a friend of mine that I played against in high school. I'm Puerto Rican. My mother's Puerto Rican. But I don't have a Spanish surname. So nobody really knew unless you had met my mother, and he had met my mother. So my homeboy, Patrick Hernandez, he was at Columbia. Mm-hmm. And there was a team from Puerto Rico that was holding a workout in the city looking for Puerto Rican players to play on their professional team in Puerto Rico. So he called me up, he invited me. It was spring break, so I was going through the city anyway. So I was like, yeah, sure. Came down. And it was, kind of a glorified pickup game that was kind of being held by this team in Puerto Rico. So it was a couple Puerto Rican players like myself and Pat who played in college. And then they were also looking at import players, so pros who were, part of their workout. So we play, they set us up and, we warm up. And, I didn't know much. I'd been to Puerto Rico. I had family there. But I didn't know much at all about Puerto Rican basketball. It just wasn't a thing that I considered. I didn't know much about overseas basketball. Mm-hmm. So what I didn't know is the Puerto Rico's professional league is older than the NBA. It's gone nonstop for 80 plus years. I didn't know that they were very competitive on the international scene, considering what a small island it is and how many, few Puerto Ricans there actually are. I didn't realize there was anybody who was Puerto Rican who would be my size. New for me, I was the biggest Puerto Rican I had ever met at that point. So, went to this workout, first play of the game. I think I got a steal. I put it around my back and dunked it from almost the free throw line. What? And that was the first play. So the owner of the team who was there, he said, whoa, hold up, timeout. Called me to the side. He was like, who are you? Like, what? Like, are you Puerto Rican? Like,
are you sure you're Puerto Rican?
Yeah, no, that's literally what he said. You sure? So he asked me, like, my family, like, where's my mother from? Where's my grandparents from? Like, we went through the whole thing. So he's like, all right. He was like, yo, well, you can go back and play if you want, but you don't have to. He was like, I'm going to call, do some things on my end. But he was like, but I really love you to be a part of what we're doing. So I was like, all right. So I went back and played. I literally didn't think about it again. I was like, I'm in college. Like, what am I going to do? But Puerto Rican league had a loophole built into the NCAA regulations that allowed you, if you were qualified for the national team, to participate in the league during the summer and maintain your eligibility. So that meant after my junior year in college, I spent the summer in Puerto Rico playing professional basketball and being able to go back and play in college. So I spent a summer, my first summer ever, really training, praying, and practicing basketball exclusively. Like that's what I did. They paid me. I think I made, I don't know, $8,000 or something like that. Which for college, like for me, that was great. I'd work jobs every other summer, and I don't think I made $8,000. So, and so they put me in an apartment in Puerto Rico in Isla Verde, which was on the beach. They gave me a car, and my job was to, work out every day, go to practices every day, play in the games, and that was it. So that kind of opened my eyes. It allowed me a whole summer to train, which I'd never done. It gave me a level of competition, which, kind of forced me to get better. And, I had some vets who really poured into me, guys who had been in the NBA, Puerto Rican and, American, that were, my plan was to go to law school. So I was at Cornell to go to law school. Like, I didn't think there was going to be a professional basketball after that. Right. I was good, but I wasn't that good. I played with enough and against enough NBA guys to know that I wasn't an NBA player. But like I said, I was still late blooming. So all of a sudden, I a summer of training, I got really, really athletic. And, guys were like, look, you can do this. Like, you're good enough to play and get paid. So I changed my trajectory a little bit, and next thing you knew, law school was, on the back shelf, and I was going to go play professional basketball.
Wow, what a story! Did you say play, pray, and practice?
No, I said play and practice. Yeah, play and practice.
Okay. I was like, wow,
there's certainly some prayers in there, but no, it was a play and practice.
Okay,
a lot of time on the beach, a lot of hanging out with, just exploring the island.
Yep. Okay.
And my aunt who lived in Puerto Rico, she took care of me. She was like a second mom. Like, she, helped me navigate, figure things out. Mind you, at this time, I didn't speak Spanish.
Really?
So, yeah. So spent a whole summer in Puerto Rico.
Now. So, yeah. Okay. You're super fluent now. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Now I am. But, I spent my whole life living, in mostly majority Spanish speaking countries. So it came along, but certainly at that time, that first year, I didn't speak any Spanish. So it was an adventure.
So your mom had a career in law enforcement, and I believe you told me that your dad was in public service as well. What did your dad do?
So he's a state assemblyman in New York. So his district is in Queens. So his district was East Elmhurst, Corona, Woodside, Jackson Heights. So in those towns, you have LaGuardia Airport and you have Rikers Island. So very important district. He did that for 30 plus years. He, won most elections by a 95% margin. He did it so long that he was the preeminent, Black Democrat in New York State, was front and center in dismantling the Rockefeller drug laws. Has dedicated himself to the community for most of his life. Before he was an elected official, he worked in public service at the Queensborough President's Office, doing economic development. He worked in community organizations that did, drug rehabilitation programs, education programs, lunch programs. He had literally lived a life of public service and, and made a huge impact on the community in New York City and the state, really, in his role as an assemblyman.
So that's amazing. Did your parents' careers contribute to you thinking you were going to be an attorney when you grew up?
I'm not sure. I'm actually thinking that my idea to become an attorney probably stemmed from, some of the TV shows I used to watch as a kid. Seemed like an interesting way to engage in the law. I was a reader, so some of the characters I liked in books, certainly stood out to me. It was an interesting way to think about, how I came up with that idea. But the funniest thing is, on days I stayed home from school sick, my favorite show to watch was Divorce Court. I don't know why. It was just, it was ridiculously entertaining for me. And, I would, if I had to pin my lawyer aspirations on something, I'd probably put it on that.
No way. That is wild. I did not see that coming. You're full of surprises, Jeff.
Yeah.
So apparently that didn't work out. I'm so
Mhm.
sorry you didn't end up to grow up and be a divorce attorney.
Right.
But tell me a little bit more about your journey. I know you've played in multiple countries. So tell me
Mhm.
about your journey as a professional player.
Sure. So Puerto Rico obviously was a start for me. Went back to school, had a good senior year, and then came back the next year. My first playing job came that fall after I graduated from college in Spain. I was in the third division playing in Spain. It was my first time in Europe. It was just what an event. I spent 9, 10 months in Europe, in Spain that year. A lot of growing up, a lot of developing. Went from there to Venezuela. Played in Chile and Peru, then back to Puerto Rico, and it just swirled around. All in all, probably around 12 different countries. Up and down South America. So from Mexico, Dominican Republic to Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, then Europe again. But the more important place I landed to play was the NBA D League. So it's the NBA Development League. It started in 2001. I was a member of the first draft class. And I had been already playing a couple years professionally, so I had some experience. And this was just the beginning of the NBA D League, which is now the NBA G League. So, I mean, we were all like, the training camp had 180 guys playing for 80 spots. There was 8 teams, all in the Southeast, 10-man rosters. And we were all just so certain, like, this was how we were going to get to the NBA. Like, this was it. They when you arrive the first day, they give you a packet, rules, regulations, a list of who's at the camp. And I looked at that list, and it was the who's who of like college basketball stars, like guys I had watched on TV. Mind you, I went to an Ivy League school. I wasn't on scholarship. Like, twice a season we play probably a Power 4, Power 5 school, and they'd kill us.
They'd slaughter you.
So like I looked at this list and I was like, how the hell did I get here? But
right.
There I was. I had a really good training camp. And I ended up being the first pick in the 5th round for the Fayetteville Patriots.
What?
Which, was, amazing. I definitely, a crazy opportunity for me, and ended up being one of the best business decisions I made as a player. At the time, the money wasn't great. It was probably for a 5-month season, $28,000 or something like that. But it connected me to the NBA family, which ended up being really important because as I was transitioning out of playing, I participated in an internship at the NBA offices that was only available for former players. And because I had played in the D League those years, that qualified me for the program, and that program helped me, lead me to a full-time position at the NBA.
That is awesome. So how long did you play professionally? Because you had a pretty long career, yes?
Yeah.
Considering compared to others. How long?
18.
Woo!
Yeah.
What's the average? This, I could guess, but I know the average.
I mean, overseas, I don't know. Actually, I don't think there's data on overseas careers. The average NBA career is probably 4.5 years. Average G League career is about 2.5 seasons.
Wow.
But overseas, not a lot of data. It's just, I was fortunate. I had some major surgeries in my 20s, knee surgeries, but was remarkably healthy in my 30s. So I was able to kind of stretch it out. And I felt like I kept getting better. And, the measure of improving in that world is, what does your salary do? Like, are people still paying you more?
Right.
So as long as the money was going up, I kept playing. And, honestly, I loved it. I would play.
I want to make sure 18?
Huh?
Did you say 18?
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I would imagine, though, during that time, I mean, every interview that I do, I always try to focus on, because, when folks are aspiring and chasing their dreams and goals, especially in today's world where social media just really makes folks feel like the heart isn't there, but the heart is there. So there's no way during that time or any other time that you haven't had a moment where you almost wanted to quit, or maybe you did. I don't know if it was during that time or perhaps some other time, but tell me about a time when you almost quit. Sure. And what was going on that got you to that consideration.
Yeah. So actually I have to rewind all the way back. It was my freshman year. of college. Training, we had started preseason. It was hard. It was tough, right? Physically, I was just struggling with it. Class wise, like the stress level, a lot of work was starting to build up. Imagine this is first semester of college, freshman year. And, my coach had recruited somebody else at my position. So I came in, didn't know about it till I arrived on campus. And he was better than me. Like, he was a better player, like more
If we're gonna
skilled,
be
like
honest.
strong.
Okay.
He was probably a little bigger than me. I mean, so that was hard.
Bigger as in taller?
Yeah.
How tall were you back then?
I mean, I probably topped out now at 6'9", but I was probably about 6'8" or so. Wow. But big guy, Big Dave. Mm-hmm. So Big Dave was kicking my ass in practice. I was struggling. it's just a tough time. Mm-hmm. And, I was also at a point because, again, I wasn't on an athletic scholarship. I got it accepted to Cornell on my academic merits. So I was, first time like conceiving of a life that didn't include me playing basketball anymore. Mm-hmm. What happened is I just got to a point where I was like, you know what? Why am I doing this? Like, mm-hmm. What am I doing this for? It wasn't much fun. It was a lot of work. And, I knew I couldn't leave unless I had a good practice. So I went into one practice and just probably had my best practice up to that point. Like, just, all over the place, physical, dunking, all of that. And then at the end of practice, I sat down with coach and said, Coach, I think this will be my last practice. I think I'm going to step away from this. So first he laughed, but then he took it seriously and we talked for a minute and he was like, you know what, just take a couple of days and really think about it. And I thought my mind was made up. I was like, I can think about all I want. I've thought about it. Like, I'm done. So next day, 2 days, maybe, my grandfather passed away. I got a phone call from home and, he had diabetes and it got to a point and, he was gone. So, my grandfather was, a part of the group of people around me that had always, just loved on me and, incredible person. And so I went home to kind of go through that process with the family and realized like, I needed to be playing some basketball. Like, like, what am I doing here? So I called coach and told him kind of where I was, what I was doing, but that I'd love to come back the minute I stepped back on campus. And, he welcomed me back with open arms. He was really understanding. And from that moment on, when I got back, I was a whole different kind of focused. I took it upon myself to earn the spot I thought I should have. And before the season started, Big Dave quit.
What?
Yeah. I was.
Why? Because you were flashing on him?
Yeah. I mean, look, he's a big burly white guy from California. And, and I decided that I wasn't going to let him take whatever spot I thought I deserved. So I proceeded to kick his ass in practice every day, kind of renewed energy and focus. And, before we knew it, Big Dave was having that conversation with coach the same way I did. And he was done. And
wow, that is. What a story. So listen, I work with a lot of elite performers. It's part of my research. And one of the things that stands out when I'm working with folks who maybe are not naturally elite performers, because I do think some of that is just innate in you if you have it, folks don't understand. And I love the analogy in sports of like getting in a zone, right? Because it sounds to me like you literally went in a zone. For folks who don't play, what does that mean? Is there anything you could give to kind of help people understand how they can channel like you did to get in a zone in that moment?
Sure. I don't know it's the moments. I think a big part of it is being present. So you have to be where your feet are. And I think you have to use more than it's not just physical. It is certainly emotional and mental focus. It is also I think you understanding and having a deep understanding of who you are, what you bring to the table, and how to leverage everything you bring in what you do. So over the course of my career, not many of my statistics stand out. They just don't. But when people ask me what I did well, I won. I won.
Mm.
I have 9 professional championships in 18 years, which is a pretty good winning percentage considering the amount of basketball I played. Um, and a big part of being valuable to those teams is, I think, diagnosing what those teams need. Like, what do we need to be great? What do we need to get us there? And then how could I bring that? So a big part of that, for me was seeing the gaps, right? Where I could fit in, what I could do to help some of my teammates be better. Now, I'm not going to tell you that we won because of me, but I had some really good teammates. I had some, like, if you go down a list of great players not in the NBA at that time, I played with a ton of them and had them on my team, and that was a big part of why we won. But they wanted to play with me because I was able to. I was just selfless as a player. Like, my numbers were not what I cared about. I cared about us winning. So if your job was to hit threes, I'm gonna make sure you get open and take as many as you need to take. I as a power forward center, like, it is difficult when you're in those roles and you don't get the ball to continue to play hard on every possession, right? It's just natural, right? You're not getting the ball, you don't feel engaged in the offense, so you tend to let down. And probably my superpower was that never slowed me down from playing hard. So I didn't need you to give me the ball. I was a rebounder. I was going to go get it. So, I used to tell some of my guards, like, look, when I set a screen for you, if you're open, shoot it, because I'm going to go get the rebound. And then I'll likely, depending on what happens, if I can't put it back in, I'm going to turn around and find you again. And I want you to shoot it again. So when you give the people around you confidence to do what they do well, they can't help but succeed at it. And, when you play with somebody who just keeps encouraging you to do your thing, well, you're going to do your thing. And I think that put me in a position to have some really good teammates. And you put, a bunch of those high achievers you're talking about all together, and you're going to win some things. And that's what we did.
I love this. And I also love that while you have all this experience in the sports world as a player, you now activate that in your role with labor relations, and you're similar to me in, I call you this respectfully because I call myself this too, a cool nerd when it comes to leadership and organizational development, success, all those things. So most of the folks who listen to my interviews are not athletes. And so let's talk about how some of that translates into the business world, right? At which you would know. So let's talk about what suggestions do you have for folks who are either leading businesses themselves, businesses they own, and or working in a leadership role within a corporation or organization? What are some of those translatable skill sets and approaches that you found worked on the court and you find work in business?
I always think about, like, when you play a sport for a living, it's because you love it, right? Yeah, you're compensated, but if I never got paid to play basketball, I would still play basketball because I cared that much about it. So if you don't have that same approach to whatever business or area you're in, you better find a new one. Because only passion can drive the kind of energy and focus you'll need to succeed. Only passion. So if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you got to rethink what you're doing. In that, I say that prior to me starting in a corporate role, I never had a sick day. You know what you do when you're sick? You get up and go to practice. You go play the game, right? They're literally a no excuses, mentality. And I also think about preparation, right? How you prepare for games. Now, lots of folks just show up to the game. But me, I was a studier. So I'm going to look at the stats for the team that we're playing against. I'm going to watch as much video as there is available. I'm going to understand them. I'm going to watch them warm up. I want to know what hand you like shooting with, where you like to shoot, what your rhythm looks like. And then I thought a lot about, kind of analyzing, like, what are their motivations? Now, this is in a competitive space, right? So it's me against you. So I think about what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish. So I mentioned that, like, I didn't care about stats. That's unique. Most players care about stats. So if I know that you haven't gotten the ball in a couple of possessions, I know the next time you get it, you're going to most definitely shoot, which means I can play you a different way. So I think that applies in business, right? As we think about strategy, you really have to analyze your competition in the market, whatever market you're in, understand what their goals are, understand what they're trying to accomplish. And if you can, position yourself in a way to, intercept that, to corner a part of the market that they're driving towards, well, one of you is going to be successful and the other one won't. So I think that diagnosis, that analysis is really important, and it has to happen in real time, right? Because nothing's going to slow down for you. So it's how fast can you make those connections? How quickly can you recognize those patterns? And, definitely a transferable skill from sports is the pattern recognition.
Yeah.
I think the other part is in sports, if you're deficient in a skill, well, you work at it. So that absolutely translates to business. If there's things that you don't know that you need to know, you better get on it, right? There's more access to information now than there's ever been in the history of mankind. You can find a website, an ebook,
ChatGPT is out here, right?
Everything is accessible to you. So there's no excuse not to know, right? Because you can absolutely go find out. So if you're not leveraging all those resources to make yourself better, smarter, more knowledgeable, you're not trying to win, right? So I think that goes to it as well. And then I would say in sports, like, you don't want to win. You need to win, right? You don't get paid to play. You get paid to win. And I think that's the attitude you have to take into business, right? You don't want to succeed. You need to. And that is a whole different animal that drives you a whole different way. So that, when there's obstacles, when there's adversity, you roll off, you go over, you go under, you go around, but you don't stop. And I think that is a mentality that if you're able to bring that to your everyday business and work, how could you not succeed?
Listen, drop the mic, my guy. This is church right here. Woo! All right. So let's talk about relationships. I know whenever I we intersect each other a couple times a year, usually NBA All-Star and Summer League. And whenever we're going event to event, one thing for sure, the whole world stops to say hi to Jeff, because Jeff cares about the players, and it's so obvious that you do. Tell me about relationships and how important those have been. You talked about your team when you play, but tell me a little bit more about how you show up to relationships. Because I remember the first time I can't remember what event we were going to, but it took us so long to get there because it wasn't just I could tell when people were saying hi to you that it was good to see you say hi, not just dapping because they saw you. You know what I mean? I could just sense that. So tell me about relationships and how you show up to them and what inspires you to be that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I'm a team guy. I always have been. I'm it starts with basketball, right? You show up to the park, you pick the 4 best players, and let's go. So I think that that mentality has certainly carried with me into this world. I take an opportunity to pour into people as often as possible. What value can I bring to you? How can I help? How can I serve? Doing my best for everyone around me is just who I am. So I think that resonates with people. They can see through fake stuff, and it's not fake. Like I think we can all win. And sometimes it means connecting the dots. So the relationship I think you should have with somebody else, a connection that could, help you take the next step. And sometimes it's just responding to outreach, right? I get a lot of young people on LinkedIn that reach out that want informational interviews, and I try to accommodate as many of them as possible. Just give them a couple minutes. But all of that is just things I pay forward. I feel like people have poured into me when I was, making my transition from on the court to figuring out life afterwards. And I feel obligated to do the same. It's always kind of, I think, what can I do for others? Because that's the best way to do for myself. That's the most, I think, fulfilled I feel, is seeing somebody that I've supported win, get the job they wanted, get the role they wanted, get the raise they wanted, start the business they wanted. I mean, that's an amazing feeling. It's what I do for players now. when I was at the NBA, I led a rookie transition program, and I got to usher in, a number of rookie classes. I would hand them, walk them to the stage on draft night, kind of give them the ins and outs of being a professional, help them think about, financial literacy and mental wellness, investments, saving their money, being their best selves. And to see many of these, and they came in as kids, many of these men now sign, 9-figure contracts, 9-figure deals. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing. It makes me so happy. I don't want anything from them. I don't need anything from them. But to see them win, to see them succeed, to see them touch their dreams the way they have is a thrill. Mm-hmm. So I look at every relationship that way, because you don't have to, be on your way towards a 9-figure deal for me to get the same fulfillment in seeing you win and seeing you succeed and reach your goals. So with that kind of perspective and attitude that I kind of bring to every relationship, every connection point, I guess it resonates with folks. But I have a sincere interest in people. I like to know who you are, what you're about, what you're trying to do, and if there's a way I can help, I will. But even if it's just, giving you some support, as a cheerleader from the side, it's something I'm happy to do. It's just a part of who I am, and it's obviously satisfying when that resonates with folks.
No doubt. No doubt. So I'm curious, kind of taking that a little bit further into the topic of leadership, which I believe you're now teaching leadership. Yes.
Yeah. I'm an adjunct professor at Columbia in their sports management graduate program, teaching leadership in sports. So it's been a pretty fun journey.
Awesome. So tell me about, give me maybe like top 3 key leadership skill sets that you think are important across the board, whether in sports or not. Again, most of our listeners are not in sports. What are key leadership skills and approaches that no matter where or when or how, these are just things that you just have to be thoughtful about?
Yeah. I think leaders, you have to have vision. You have to see a path ahead that others may not see yet. It's really important, right? Vision gives you direction. It'll give your group, your team, your organization direction. So you got to have vision. The next thing I think is you got to be a great communicator. So once you have that vision, you got to figure out how to share it with your group, with your team, with those that you lead and you're in charge of or you manage. The clearer you can make that vision for them, the more enthusiastically they'll go with you. And that's, I think that's the key for any successful team, right? Is do we all agree where we're going, and do we all agree how we're going to get there? And, many of us get paid for the words we say, right? So communicating is key. And then I think the third thing is, any group you lead, you have to have sincere affection for. If you don't care about the people you're leading, you can't effectively lead them. Right? You're not fit to. You don't deserve to. So that would be the last thing. I think you got to love the people that are with you. Love on them, encourage them, push them, drive them, but always from a place of genuine affection for them and who they are, what they are, and what they mean to your organization. Nobody gets anywhere by themselves. So understand that the folks that you lead are important. Not just to the goal you have at the end, but to the journey, which ends up being way more important.
Which sounds great, Jeff. However, I can hear people in their heads saying, "You don't know who I work with," right? There's people that I really just cannot stand, and I think when I look at the consulting I do in the hoods that I've seen under, organizational culture is super, super, super challenging. Especially today, and obviously no matter what season of the world we're in, which we're in a really difficult one right now, where there's a lot of division and a lot of focusing on alleged differences. What do you say to them? Because that sounds good in theory, but in real life there are some difficult people out here. How do you deal with that?
Absolutely.
I'm sure you didn't love all your guys you played with, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, Certainly did not get along with all of them. Don't like all of them, but in the context of what we need to do, loved on all of them. Right.
Mm,
Look, I think this is where your culture really matters in your organization, right? You establish a culture that has your principles and your values deeply embedded in it.
mhm.
And then it is uncomfortable for anybody that does not resonate with those values to be a part of your organization.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean you have to make it uncomfortable, but a strong culture will make it uncomfortable.
Mhm,
And, they'll see themselves to the door,
mhm,
right? But while they're in your charge, I think your obligation is to be a fair leader for all of them,
mhm.
and that requires, like I said, some affection for the people you're leading. And mind you, like, nobody ever said it was easy. I didn't say those three things were easy to do. They're really difficult, and sometimes seemingly impossible. But as the old adage is, if it were easy, everybody would do it. But not everybody does, right? So, the things we dream about, the successes we're reaching for, if they were easy, we'd get bored pretty quick, right? So those high achievers you mentioned, they go high because the low hanging fruit ain't enough, right? So
Ooh.
that would be my response when you talk about leading people you may not particularly like. And I think we all have some family members we don't vibe with. Loving people from a distance is a part of it, right? So if you got to delegate some of that loving to somebody else that's that's in your group, well, maybe that's the key. Certainly another important skill to have when you're in
Mhm,
leadership.
mhm.
But those three that I mentioned are my primaries.
I love it. Thank you for that tough lesson in love. All right. So listen, we're living in a very uncertain world, right? And I feel like perhaps it's getting more uncertain by the day, and really change is the norm these days. So thinking about you, you've been through multiple transitions. So I'm curious, what mindsets or mantras do you rely upon when you're facing uncertainty to kind of get you through and keep you grounded?
Oh, man. So I think about how lucky I am, how fortunate.
Mhm.
Um, you know, like everyone's life, like I've not always made right decisions. I've made mistakes, and I was, probably one silly mistake from, none of this happening.
Mm,
So I think about how fortunate I am to be wherever I am, to have the kind of problems I have. And then I also think about, and I think about if somebody would have told me, 10 years ago that I'd be where I am today doing what I'm doing today, I would have said, hell yes, sign me up. Right. So in the day to day, when, it gets rough or it's hard or, you have failures or things don't go well, I try to keep that in mind. Like I would
mhm,
have signed up for this without a doubt 10 years from now. And now here I have
mhm,
it. And then the other part, I think the last thing would be, every success is built on a mountain of failures, right?
mm,
You gotta lose to learn how to win.
mm,
And, the hardest things you do will also lead you to the greatest things you do.
mm,
So as things get tough and things get hard, it's just, a way of the universe preparing you for what's to come.
mm.
So if you approach them, those hard days with that kind of attitude, they certainly become a little more bearable. And to know that, there's something on the other side of that.
Lovely, lovely. So there are some people who may say, well, yeah, of course you're grateful because you're working with professional players and you got to play in the league and all the things. What would you say to people when you're sitting here giving the suggestion that we must be grateful for what we have and be thankful that we've gotten to what we've gotten to and have the problems we have? What would you say to folks who maybe assume that's because you did something superstarish or are part of a network that most folks will never be a part of, and maybe feel or diminish what it is they're a part of?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, you gotta appreciate the journey you're on. Everybody's journey is different. Right.
Mhm,
So, that I got to do some really cool things, but it's not to say that I'm done. Like there's not
mhm,
things I wish I wouldn't have done differently or wish I didn't accomplish. Right.
mhm,
Everybody, if you're not falling short on some of your goals probably aren't lofty enough.
mm.
So, and that's just a part of the journey. So everybody's got their own race to run. You got to live in your own skin, and you got to be able to look at yourself in the mirror every day. So everybody's reality is going to be a bit different, but there's nobody who has an easy journey. Nobody, right?
What you mean to tell me that all these pro players who are making millions and billions of dollars don't have it easy?
There is no easy. There is no easy. And the things they've done to get there were impossible. And, the life they lead right now is still difficult. Money does not make you happy. The hardest part of that, though, is that you have to get money to figure that out.
Woo, Jeff, you're killing it today. All right. So shifting, you and I are big on well-being. And I know one of the things that I always appreciate about you and inspires me about you and even other athletes, because in sport, there's so much routine that's just part of your world. And that's something I had to develop over time. I remember getting to a point where I realized what got me here at that moment wouldn't get me further. Right. And I was coasting very much at some point just on natural gifts. And then I started having to really add structure, routine, and all of that to my life. And one thing I know, anytime I've encountered you, you are very much committed to a routine that keeps you well. And you would have to be to play 18 years in the league. And that's not just physically, but that's also mentally and emotionally. So give us some of your tips and tricks for how you stay well and take care of you, especially considering you're such a giver and so thoughtful about everybody else.
I think a daily exercise is important. I figured that out about myself when I was in grad school, that in order to focus, have my mind focused, I needed to move. Which when my playing days wasn't an issue because I was practicing or playing twice a day. So, I didn't have to think about it. But when I, started slowing that down and retiring, I had to think about it. So I had to very intentionally think about moving, exercising, stretching, doing that daily for my mental focus, not just my physical well-being, which obviously became very important. And then I like reading. I read a lot and not just, kind of subject related books to what I'm working on, but a lot of fiction. I think it's a way of triggering your imagination, which helps with problem solving. So, I read sci-fi and fantasy and things that are, completely unrelated to what my day-to-day work looks like. But I'm really fulfilled with some of those stories. They resonate. I think they trigger, emotions in me and ways of looking at the world that I almost, could have missed. I think it's important to, think about the world in other perspectives, and that's certainly helpful. So you get out of your own limited kind of purview. And then I think just interacting with folks, in the world, like when you go out and talk to people, politeness. I mean, I think there's no reason not to be kind to folks. It doesn't cost you anything. It enriches your spirit, certainly enriches those, a smile, a hello, genuine regard for folks that you interact with on a daily basis, and not just people people you don't know. Try to give people as much grace as possible. I always think about, somebody cuts you off while you're driving. Clearly they're in a rush, and maybe that's, just what happened for today. So I always think about that as well. And, those three things kind of help me stay balanced on a day-to-day, avoid, some of the self-induced stresses and worries and things that, really impact our well-being. But, I figure like if I can stay in those spaces, do those things consistently, then, most days are going to take care of themselves.
Love it. Love it. And I was going to ask you, because anytime I've ever talked to you, you may have 2 to 5 books that you recommend. So I'm not going to ask you for one, because I feel like that would be really like true punishment. So 3 books, especially as we're celebrating the awesomeness that is Black and beautiful. Give me 3 books that you feel like folks just have to read.
Sure. So the first one, Death of a King, Tavis Smiley. He talks about Dr. King's last year of life, 1967 into 68. We all obviously heard I Have a Dream speech, can recite parts of it. That was 1963. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
man lived 5 years more than that. And it's just an interesting look into his life that last year. He was wildly unpopular in the United States, in the Black community as well, because of his anti-war stance, because of his connection with other ethnic groups and their movements. He shifted his view from the politics of race to poverty. And so just fascinating book. I think it's definitely worth a read for folks. I think about another one called The White Boy Shuffle by Paul Beatty. One of my favorite books. Paul Beatty is actually a poet who writes fiction. So his prose is just beautiful. It's funny. And also it's kind of the book that I think, I really kind of find myself in. It's about a young brother who grew up in Venice Beach skateboarding with white kids. And then his mother moves him to a Black neighborhood as a teenager. And now he has to navigate that world as someone who is completely unaccustomed to being around Black folks. So discovers that he's really athletic and, becomes a really good basketball player while also being a poet and an academic. Just a really interesting journey, funny as anything. I think I might have read it 3 or 4 times already. So recommend that one. And then the third one, I would say Octavia Butler's Wild Seed. Another one of my favorites. Octavia Butler, Black sci-fi writer, created the genre for kind of Afrofuturism. Amazing book, and character development, story, just super compelling about a woman in Africa who is a shapeshifter. Who is also a healer, and I wouldn't ruin the story for anybody, but another one that I've read multiple times just because of the way it makes you look at the world and the relationship between different cultures. And then I'm gonna give you one fourth one, just because
I knew you weren't going to be able to do it.
Well, look, this one, look, it's called Lion's Blood. So it is a reimagining of the world where Europeans did not discover America. Africans and Arabs did. So it essentially flips history on its head. Arabs and Africans enslaved Europeans to farm and build in the United States. And I don't remember the author's name right now, but as I mentioned, like a paradigm shifting look at the transatlantic slave trade and the impact on the world of very small historical things and how things could have shifted. So super interesting, definitely compelling, but a couple books I recommend.
I knew you weren't going to be able to do 3. All right. Before I ask you my last question, I just realized that listeners are probably hanging, struggling with the fact that I know the outcome, but they don't. You started us off at the top of the interview sharing that your mother slipped into struggling with drugs and that you took care of yourself while she was at rehab. We didn't find out her ending and how that went for her. So I don't want to have readers or listeners coming for me because they're wondering how your mom is doing or how she came out. So could you please update us so that we can know how that turned out?
Yeah, well, that's a pretty long story, but she turned things around for herself. And while I was in college, she started a business, direct marketing business, moved herself to Atlanta, was able to pay for my last 2 years in college.
Wow.
Pretty much no financial aid. She, was an entrepreneur, took her, enthusiasm for life and turned it towards that business. As businesses go, they did well, then started slowing down. She ended her life living in Puerto Rico on the beach, was able to go to a lot of my games before I retired. And, so certainly took that adversity and turned it all the way around for herself.
Thank you so much for that. I'm so glad I remembered to ask that. I can hear people coming for me now. All right. So my last question is, at Achieve Global, our tagline is cultivating meaningful success together. I'm curious, what does meaningful success mean to you?
I think that's personal, but I think meaningful success is how you're impacting your community, how you're impacting the others. As I mentioned in kind of this conversation, like the most fulfillment I get is from seeing other people's, succeed, and being able to have a hand in that. So, I think meaningful success is what we can achieve together.
Awesome. Well, that said, I look forward to our conversation at our event we're going to have in All-Star about cultivating meaningful success via wealth building with athletes, entertainers, business owners, and investors. And more importantly, Jeff, thank you for your time and thank you for all you do for everyone. Happy Black History Month, y'all. If you want to know more about Achieve Global, visit us at achieve.global. We will see you all very soon. Thanks again, Jeff.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.